I am the greatest.
Be water, my friend.
Welcome to One Hit Podcast. We're here with Burt Watson, legend, boxing legend, UFC legend all over. So thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure being with you, baby, and I appreciate the invite.
Love it. Because anyone who knows who you are, your manager, just Smokin Joe Frazier, Tournament Muhammad Ali, 15 years UFC coordinator,
Yes, sir.
worked with John Jones, Conor McGregor, and now you're on the One Hit Podcast. So it's all going good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's all going good. It's all been good. It's all been a great ride. I'm still riding. I'm still rolling.
Still rolling, yeah.
And excited to be with you on the One Hit Podcast from Ireland. Is that where it is?
Yeah, I live between Belfast and Dublin, right in the middle. So right in the middle of Ireland.
Okay, all right. I'm very familiar with that area. You know,
so it's,
I've been there a few times, and I'm kind of brain farting a little bit, but I did. Whose show did I do in Ireland? Oh, Mike Tyson and Lou Salvarez. Boom.
Easy as that.
Do you remember what? Do you remember what where that was in Ireland?
No, I remember I was talking to Mike once. He told me he was in Sligo, but I don't think the fight was in Sligo.
No, it was, and as we go along, I'll remember. But it was Mike Tyson and Lou Salvarez, and it actually rained that night.
Surprise!
And I got Mike and Lou. For the very first time, I had to use not only an umbrella, but I had to put plastic bags around their feet so that he wouldn't get wet walking from the holding area to the ring, which was Glasgow, Scotland.
Glasgow, yes.
That's what it was, yes. And that was actually the second fight between Scotland and Ireland that I did in boxing. And it was quite the trip, you know. But it was Showtime. The fight was on Showtime, and it rained.
Of course.
Even in the rain, because between Ireland, Scotland, and that whole area, you know, outside of the United States, you guys call soccer is football, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And it's huge, humongous. And these were all soccer fans that came to see Mike Tyson. So in the rain, we had maybe about, I'd say between 5,000 and 10,000 people in the rain.
Awesome.
Although I think the arena held about 20, we had that many out there in the rain.
That's awesome. Was that back in the 90s, was it?
Yes, sir. It was, I think it was 96, maybe, you know, not 100% sure. Could be earlier than that, man. You know, my brain runs as fast as I do, you know, because I've been around boxing and MMA for a little while.
Yeah. And
started in boxing. I think one of my very first boxing events was March 8th, 1971.
Whoa.
That's probably older than your parents.
Whoa. It's a long time ago.
And that was Muhammad Ali and Smokin Joe Frazier in Madison Square Garden.
Awesome.
One of the greatest fights in the history of combat sports.
Yes.
But it happened, and that was my introduction. I wasn't working or anything, but I knew Joe kinda, and our friendship developed a little more over the years, and then I later on became his manager. Later on in his career, his last fight was in 1981 against Jumbo Cummings, and you know, from that point on, it was me and him, baby, you know. But it was, you know, it was back in the day. And I, you know what? As a matter of fact, today is January
7th.
You know, Joe's birthday is coming up.
Hi, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, all born in January, yeah.
You did your homework, baby.
I done my homework.
And I got one more who the world probably doesn't. One's the 12th, the 17th, and the 20th. And then I think on the 11th, I'm not sure the date, but I also know Floyd Patterson, who was a heavyweight champion.
So all the heavyweights.
Fought Ingemar Johansson. He was also in January. So, you know, you had Floyd Patterson, Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, and George Foreman. All born in January.
Some of the best ever.
Yes, sir.
Brilliant.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And like you've worked with all them top gigs and all. Like, how did you get into it? Like, where did it come from? Like, were you chasing that from a young age to work with boxers? Did you want to be a boxer? Or like, how did it come to that stage, working with the greatest of the greats?
Never had that as an ambition, or was it never really in my head? As a matter of fact, in high school, I ran track. I was pretty quick. Okay, I always had speed, and so track and field actually was where my head was. And you know, I went away to school in Nebraska. I went to a very small college in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, called Hiram Scott College, way back in the day. And actually, I went there. I ran track a little bit, but business was on my head. Boxing, never, or sports, you know, in that aspect. And then I got out of college. I went to the Marine Corps. I spent 3 years in the Marine Corps. I got out of the Marine Corps in 1971 at the beginning. And I spent 3 years in the Marine Corps. And I had a chance meeting walking down the streets of New York one day, and there was an automobile accident, and the traffic was stopped, and there was a vehicle stop there in the traffic, and in that vehicle was Smokin Joe Frazier, who got out to see what was going on, and me being that person, just, hey, you know, wow, there's, you know, and went over and started the conversation. We exchanged numbers, and kept in touch a little bit.
Yes.
Wasn't back then was not at all like it was today. But the irony was, he was in Philadelphia, and I was from Philadelphia, and was still visiting Philadelphia because my parents still lived in Philadelphia. So I always went back and forth to Philadelphia from New York. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I got married and moved to Ridgewood, New Jersey, and worked in Manhattan. I actually started in the fashion industry, if you can believe that.
Can't believe that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's when I actually started. I was selling piece goods to manufacturers of men's suits. And I even had Levi Strauss as a customer, and, you know, Hickey Freeman, which you probably don't know, but they all made, but that's what I was into. And that chance meeting of Joe, and, you know, him being from Philly and me visiting Philly and keeping in touch, and it just kind of blew my mind. And then I told the story times before, and then again, going back to Philadelphia where my parents were. And my niece got married. She got married, and being my niece, I had parts in the wedding. And as a gift to my niece, not my niece, as a gift to my mother, one of my mother's friends gave my niece a gift, which was a limousine service to transport the bride during the wedding. we're in the house, in my mother's house for the wedding, waiting for the limousine to show up, and I'm sitting inside. My nephew comes in, and Uncle Burt, the limo's outside, and there's no place to park. I went outside and said, I'll go tell him to park the car. I walked outside, walked around to the front of the limo, knocked on the window. The guy rolled the window down and looked at me and said, where do you want me? And I looked, and it was Smokin Joe Frazier driving the limo.
That is crazy.
True story.
That is crazy.
Absolutely true story. Well, that was one of his businesses. He had a limousine service. And back in the day, we didn't have cells or computers. He'd come into his gym, and there was a clipboard hanging in there. And he obviously picked the clipboard up, saw that there was supposed to be a car going out. The car was still outside, and there was no driver. He saw the job, he got it, and he drove.
Whoa.
And when he rolled that window down, I was like, whoa. And then I kind of like, nah, man, this can't be. But it was.
That's nuts. You wouldn't see that happen in the day. No, the top boxes do that today. No way.
Nope. And you know what? We developed a friendship from that point, and the rest of it, you can read it, you can find on Google.
Brilliant.
Or wherever. But we maintained a friendship, and I worked with him through the years and kind of stayed with him. And then my job I went from friend to manager, and my job was creating situations for him to make a living off of his name. Mm-hmm. Well, this was not a hard name to work for. Okay.
Yes.
But unbelievable time, because I got the people that I got to meet, the places that I got to go, the things that I got to see. You probably don't know who Elizabeth Taylor is or Richard Burton.
Oh, I do.
Back in the days, they were time. Sammy Davis Jr., Madonna, Mickey Rourke, Frank Sinatra. All these people I met through Joe and through my time with him, because everybody knew who he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was, even though I was in that time, the realization of how historic that time was never really sets in until it's over, until it's behind you and you have to sit and remember it or reminisce, or people bring it to your mind. But that was phenomenal, man. It was the people, and Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, and meeting and working with Joe and doing fights, and coordinating fights for him, led me into working and coordinating fights for everybody else, mm-hmm. which they accepted me because, I had that Joe Frazier brand on the back of my head.
Yes. The reputation of Joe Frazier's gay.
Yes, sir.
And you met sort of next kind of question I was going to ask you about sort of sports stars, but we'll break it into everyone. Was there anyone before you met back then, you went, wow, that's who I met? Some a top celebrity. You look back there and go, how the hell did I meet that person?
Nelson Mandela.
Where was this?
I will never, ever. When Nelson got out of prison, and don't quote me on the dates because I'm not 100% sure of the dates, but Nelson got out of prison, I'd say January, and it was big news, mm-hmm. That Nelson Mandela was getting out of prison, and he was very much, historically one of the biggest names in our country, in our world.
Yep.
And of course, he had interviews, and they were talking to him, and he had personal appearances. And one of the questions, and I think it was Mike Douglas, or one of them asked him, what were some of the first things he wanted to do with his time out of prison? And he said he wanted to meet Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali.
Whoa.
Because he was a boxer. He was a boxing fan.
He's a fighter.
Yes, he was a fighter. So a little more than a boxing fan.
Yes.
And that was one of the first things he wanted to do. So I got the phone call, meaning I was being Joe Frazier's manager and being in the gym. The phone call came to the gym for Joe Frazier that Nelson Mandela was going to be in New York at the United Nations building, and he wanted to meet Joe Frazier. Could we please come and visit? Well, we did. And then we're sitting in the room, Joe and I talking, getting ready to go. And Joe Frazier was probably one of the most humble superstars you'd ever want to meet. He was average Joe. That's who he was. That was his name. That's how he lived. And we're sitting in the back room talking, just him and I. And he said, you know what? Let's take that belt. And he pointed to the WBC belt that he won when he beat Muhammad Ali in 1981. And I was kind of stunned that he wanted to do that. I said, okay. We picked the belt up. We went on to New York. We got into the United Nations and went down underground where they had security waiting for us. You know, and of course, when we pulled up, they stopped the car. When he stuck his head out, they knew, well,
that's it.
You know, they knew who that was. So they let us in, and we had top security. We went downstairs in a room, and we were downstairs in a room, and this was after whatever it was that he had to do. And I'm sitting in the room, and he came walking in the room. And I was sitting in a room with Joe Frazier and Nelson Mandela.
Whoa, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Talk about fanboy. Like, whoa, man, I was really, and you know, I gave him the belt. He took the belt, and I actually put it around his waist. You know, and he was like, he was like this, and I was like this, you know. Brilliant. And then we later on had there was an event later on that was Sugar Ray Leonard, Mike Tyson. I think Hagler was there, but again we presented that same belt to Nelson, but they all were there. Don King, you know, but Nelson Mandela is the person that I met that I could honestly say probably one of the few people that I've met in my life that I will always remember that I met him. I met the Queen, and I met the Queen and her husband and Lady Di, you know, and Charles and whoever, but none of them was as much as it was meeting Mandela. And I met those. We did a video project. When I say we, Ion Productions, which is a major television company now. Back then they were just starting, and they did a video. You know, we had video cassettes back in the day, but they did a video called Champions Forever. And that was Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Ken Norton, and Larry Holmes, the five of them.
Right, yes.
And the fights the five of them had together, between the five of them. And it was called Champions Forever. And they put that video together, and we did a tour, 3 years, a world tour, and in the United States on that video. And one of the places was London. That's when I got to meet the Queen, you know, with Muhammad and Joe, and we're in the tuxedo. The first time I ever had tails on, you know. A kid from Philly, from the hood.
Going to London.
You know? But yeah. But I enjoy going out of the country and visiting, you know, Ireland and the UK and Australia, and nothing but good times, man. Germany, nothing but good times.
And where stands out the most, Burt? Where is like sort of a country you've been, or even a city you've been that you're like, this is a great city. I want to get back again sometime.
Philadelphia.
Hometown.
You know, I'll tell you, I went to Thailand, which was very strange for me, and Manila, and that's where I didn't go with Joe when he fought, but went back.
Okay.
And that was very cultural for me. And it was the first time that I'd ever been to, when you live in Philadelphia and you're from the hood. I don't know if you know what that is. I'm a hood rat, okay? You know, I'm a hood rat. You know, and when you go to a different country where even the culture is better, you know, or different and calmer, and it's quiet, it's an exchange for you. And and the first time I went to Thailand, I experienced that, and that was my first time. So that's very memorable. I'll never forget that. And then from that point, I later on went on to China and Japan and, you know, other places where the culture was different. But in terms of right here in the United States, Las Vegas, Nevada, baby.
Of course, yes. The fight capital of the world.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. I've spent the better part of my life in Las Vegas, the better part of my career in Las Vegas, the bigger parts, you know, of my career. Because at the time, most of the big fights that were held in the United States were either in Las Vegas or Atlantic City. Either one of the two.
Yes.
And Atlantic City, for me, I live in Philadelphia. So Atlantic City for me is an hour and a half drive. So it was very accessible. I could go back and forth. But getting on a plane and going to Las Vegas, you know, and most of the time I went to Las Vegas for free. Okay. So that was a good thing. You know, it didn't cost me to fly, and I didn't have to pay for the hotel. And I was in the better hotels with the casinos. Although I didn't gamble, never gambled. But it was, you know, I always had in my mind, why in the hell should I have them pay me money and give it back to them on the floor?
Yeah.
That ain't happening.
Yeah, totally agree.
That ain't happening. Even though I've seen quite a few fighters do that. Okay.
Yeah. Any UFC event you go to afterwards, the Sunday night, the fighters are putting the money all on black or red or blackjack. Crazy.
Well, you know what? That started for me in boxing, and I won't out them and put their names out. But I know. I mean, there was a time. I did a fight in Atlantic City with a fighter, huge fighter, that before the fight spent so much money on that casino floor that he had to come and get half of his purse before the end of the night, before he fought, to give back to the casino, because he had, you know, they give them a mark, you know, to spend so much money. And that guy has spent so much money, you know, and I'm like, how in the world? But then I got to know that homeboy was like that anyway. He loved to gamble, so he did that a lot. But I've known quite a few fighters, trainers, corner people, boxing and MMA, who you know, I'll take that back. Not as much in MMA as I did in boxing. A lot of the MMA fighters, if I sat here and tried to think of an MMA fighter that I saw gamble a lot, I could probably name maybe one or think of one. Boxing, I could probably name or think of 10.
Big difference.
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned there about the UFC. Go ahead, Bert.
Legitimate names, because if I throw a name out of my mouth, trust me, it's a real name.
It's no fake names. I was saying there, you're with the UFC for 15 years and sort of the babysitter to the stars, as you call it. Where did that job come from? Did the UFC contact you because of your past experience, or did you see an opportunity to break into the MMA world?
I was working, and I usually get this pretty mixed up. Whether it was De La Hoya and Arturo Gatti, or Costa Tszyu and Zab Judah. And I'm kind of almost leaning Costa Tszyu, Zab Judah. I was doing a fight in Vegas. A promoter called me, and that's once I left Joe Frazier I became very good at coordinating fights and coordinating events. And I gained a pretty good reputation doing that by people who came to events and saw the way the events went off and would come up to me and say, hey, I got an event. Are you available? Yada, yada. So that's basically, it was kind of word of mouth. And this promoter was doing a fight in Vegas, invited me and asked me to work, and I took the job, and I'm working. And we were sitting in the office talking to the guy, and he got a phone call. So I said, you know what? I'm out of here. So I got up and I walked off the phone out of his room. And before I could get down the hall, he said, whoa, come back here for a minute. He called me back in his office. He said, listen, man, I just got off the phone. There's this guy that's trying to do this thing and trying to start something, and he needs a coordinator. And, if I get you this job, will you do my next show? I said, yeah. I said, if it's for less money, I don't think so. But he said, I'll call the guy and, we'll meet him. So after the weigh-in, in between, he called the guy comes into the hotel to meet me. That guy was Dana White.
Crazy.
And he came in and we went out to get some food, not to really sit down and eat, but to get some. We're talking and, my thing was, I don't know anything about that business, what he was talking about. But what I do know is how to coordinate an event.
Yeah. I
don't care what it is. If you give it to me, I'm gonna get it done. So I can do that. All you got to do is pay me and respect me, and you got me. Plain and simple. That was it. And he was not a talkative person. He just said, okay. And he did that. And he did that. He paid me and he respects me. And the first show this was in October of 2000. Cool. So 2001, the very first Zuffa UFC, which was UFC 30, that was my job.
How's your first?
And, I did 30 and I went on and I did every single UFC he had from 30 to 185. That included the tough finale, the tough series, the Ultimate Fighter, everything in between. I did every one of them, but the very first one was UFC 30. And I think that one was, Chuck Liddell was on it, Tito Ortiz, Phil Baroni. I think BJ Penn made his pro debut. I think Jens Pulver was on it. I can't, but but these were guys I didn't know.
Yeah.
This was a sport I was totally unfamiliar with, but you know what? I was a coordinator and I was still learning my job and learning my craft, but I knew that I liked it and I knew I could do it. And it became easy for me because I had structure. I had a sense of coordinating things. I got that from my mom, in my house, and I spent 3 years in the Marine Corps,
yep.
Which everything was, so that transition to coordinating and putting things together was pretty easy. But so he gave me the gig, UFC 30, and that was in Atlantic City. And I did it, and it went well. So he called me for the next one, and he called me for the next one. He would call me. I think UFC 30 was the first one. I think the last one Dana called me for was maybe UFC 35.
Yep.
After that, it was pretty. We had developed a work relationship where I had the job.
You were there no matter what.
Yeah, he didn't have to call me anymore. So and that's kind of how I got into it. And even during that time, early on, I was still working. You know, it was UFC was moving, but it was not as big as it is now, or as big as it was when I left. And right now, today, I've been gone 5 years, and it's gotten bigger. But from the time I started to the time I left, I was able to work up until UFC. I think maybe 52 or maybe 60, something like that. I was able to do other jobs because in between that, I was working with the Klitschko Brothers. That's when I went to Germany, and you know, they had become clients of mine. And I had one, and then I got two. So I was working with both of the Klitschko Brothers, and I was doing Tyson's last few fights, because I did Tyson's last 4 fights, 5. Starting with when he fought Buster Mathis Jr. here in Philadelphia, and I think ending with Kevin McBride when Tyson, you know, he got kind of knocked out.
Yeah.
One of the Irish guys.
Yeah, Kevin McBride from Clonus in Ireland, which is about 40 minutes from my house.
Yes. Okay, him and his dad. Well, it's a good thing I ain't sitting here lying, ain't it? If I was sitting here lying, I'd be in trouble. But I was still able to do, you know, until I think about 2009, when it really started. You know, we went from I think the least amount that I remember doing was 5 fights.
Right.
A year, 4 or 5 a year. And then we shot up to 10 fights, and then 12 fights, and then 15 fights, and then 20 fights. And then it just kept going and going and going. And when I left in, I think 2015 or whenever, I had just completed a year that we did 35 fights that year.
Big difference between like 5 and 35. Big difference.
Oh yeah. You know, early on, I mean, you know, like they're doing now out on Fight Island, I think it is.
Abu Dhabi, yeah.
Yeah. Back then, I did 3 fights in a week. Mm-hmm. I did a fight on Saturday, and this is when we were doing fights at the Palms Casino. And the Palms and the Hard Rock Casino were right together. We did a fight on Saturday. We did one on Wednesday. We did the pay-per-view on Saturday. We did the Tough or Ultimate Fighter. I think it was Ultimate Fighter first, then it turned into Tough. I think, I don't know, but we did pay-per-view, Ultimate Fighter, and then pay-per-view again. So I did 3 in a week. So we did that. They were doing that earlier than just starting to do it now.
Yeah.
You know, but they were doing that for a while. I think back in 2011 we were doing 3 fights. You know, because they jumped up, they put the gas pedal real quick.
Oh yeah.
Once they got accepted by the athletic commissions in the various states, man, they put some gas in that tank and they went fast, hard and fast. And I was right there going hard and fast with them, baby.
You were rolling.
Yes, sir. I was rolling hard.
And like you're saying, 2010 to roughly 2015, you were there. I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes. You mentioned about extra events, but what other changes did you see in the UFC? Like, it was a totally different organization back in 2000 to 2015. What was different? What made it different? Like, what exploded it?
Well, I think outside of the fact that the UFC grew, the popularity of the sport grew, and there was a reason for that, why the sport grew in popularity with its fans, because the way it did. But the technical level, and I'm gonna try to be graceful with saying this, you know, yes. The technical level, when these guys came in, when we first started doing MMA and the UFC, they were grapplers, they were wrestlers, and very few of them were boxers. Okay, you know, they very few of them knew how to put that stuff together. I won't say they were fighting like this, but they weren't doing this. Okay.
Yes.
You know, but as we went along and it developed, the technical skill level of those MMA fighters, man, went through the roof. And me being a boxing guy, I could see that. I could see how they started to develop, how they started to learn to do what they now call stand up. Stand up is boxing.
Yeah.
But they learned how to do that. Initially, they weren't. Initially, they were doing as much as they can with it, but they were doing it to get their hands on you, because once they got you on the ground, then that was their world. But I saw the development of the fighters. I saw the development of their technical skills, and not only that, but the creation of different moves. You know, I wasn't very familiar with the names. You know, I knew what a rear naked choke and arm bar, but how to crucifix it and how to side mount, you know, they became so technically skilled as time went on. And I saw the development of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just, for example, you could, in boxing, the smaller guys were the quicker guys. You know, they were the ones with the fast hands. They were rapid, they were speed. In MMA, even the big guys are quick and fast, you know, and but that technical skill level was what amazed me more than anything with the development of the sport. How they went from just a grappling or wrestling sport to a mixed martial arts sport, which was a combination of all of it. Mm-hmm. You know, which was, to me, the biggest change. But the UFC itself, the foundation of the sport, the people that Dana White had around him, and the people that he had put in place to do the jobs that they did, as a coordinator, I could see the development happening. I could see that shit had legs, man. Yeah. I could see that when it got to a certain point, you know, you could see when you're promoting and when you're putting things together, what resources the promoter is putting into it, if it's going to sustain, okay, or if it's going to crumble. And what I saw, the development of it and what they were putting into it and the people they were putting around to it and the resources they were bringing out, and we were traveling around, and, you know, even before the sport got as big as it did, we were out of the country. You know, I remember the first London, I think it was Royal Albert Hall, maybe UFC 30.
Ian Freeman.
Or maybe.
Frank Mir.
Man, you know more than me.
I have a good memory.
But I remember Royal Albert Hall, you know, but you could see that it was getting legs, you know. Yeah. So it all developed basically at the same time, and it changed. And, you know, back then there was little television, and then the television came on. I forgot the name of the original people who were the television network, but started getting television, and, you know, that kind of increased the viewership, and it also increased the product that they had to produce, because you had to give a better product, you know, or sustain the product. But it was awesome. You know, the development was unbelievable for me to sit and see that and watch that. But same thing with boxing. I saw that development. Yeah. You know, I saw the development through Oscar De La Hoya, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Roberto Duran, and, you know, and heavyweights come along, like, you know, like Joe Frazier. Of course, you know, I'm going to mention, that's my man. But people like Muhammad Ali and Ken Norton and Larry Holmes, those three, you know, for being in that time frame and in that time to be as skillful as they were and as quick and as agile as they were, you know, it was impressive for me to see that development in both boxing and MMA.
Brilliant. I remember reading a quote before from Conor McGregor. he said that Burt Watson was the guy that held the UFC together. So he had a lot of good words always for you. And I know you worked with Conor not too many times compared to what you would have worked with him. Did you see anything from Conor, like his persona, him being there? Did you feel anything? Because you worked with a lot of great fighters. Was he up there with the sort of personality that you've seen?
Well, I could always, it wasn't hard to tell the guys that were there. Sometimes when the lights go on, some people's lights go out, baby. And you can tell the guys that when them lights go on, them lights got bright, that their lights were going to get a little dim. It's okay to get dim, but they can't go out. Mm-hmm. Conor McGregor, even as a rookie, for me a rookie, because anybody that came to me was a rookie. Regardless of how much time you had before coming to me, when you came to me, you were a rookie. And even coming in as a rookie, he had the same sass. He had that same strut. He had that same confidence. But the camera wasn't on him then. Yes. Because he was a rookie. But he had it. And I saw it. And a couple of times we would sit in the dressing room and we'd talk and I could see it. I could see it in his eyes. I could see it in his body. But then I could also see it in the people he had around him. Kavanaugh, just the guys that were around him, because that's also an important part of the process. Yeah. And that's also a part of the process that I pay attention to, because you got a fighter and 3 people, then I got to deal with a fighter and every one of them individually. Or a fighter and 4 people, I got to deal with them and everyone individually. So I got to notice. And I could always see, sometimes you had a fighter that you could see the people around him or behind him. You could see, you know what? That marriage is not going to last. You can see that.
Yes, yes.
You didn't express it, but you can see it. But Conor McGregor from Jump Street, I could see. I remember, was it MGM? I remember one of his first fights. He was in the dressing room, and I was lucky enough because he was new. He wasn't in the dressing room by himself, but he had someone else in the dressing room with him. And I remember going into the dressing room, and he was so focused on what he was doing. Sometimes they take that spot. They know they got other people in their room, and they respect that. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but for me, it's
huge,
pivotal.
Yeah.
Yes, that I can see that in a fighter, and I can see it happening. I know then, you know what? I'm gonna be able to turn my back on this one.
Yes.
There are guys that I couldn't turn my back on. Okay, but I could see he was, and I could also see everything that you see now. I could see it happening then, because I could see the personality, and I could see that egg was not gonna crack, baby. I can see it back there.
Showing too, like I know he hasn't fought as much as he should have been fighting over the last couple of years, but he's still up there. I believe he's fighting the 23rd of January now in Abu Dhabi Fight Island against Dustin Poirier for the second time. So everything he puts to his mind, he seems to overcome, and it's great to see that.
Well, that's also, that's also a testament to, because, longevity is the key. And you also have to establish yourself and set a mark, because, like I said, sometimes when the lights go on, some people's lights go out. Out of sight, out of mind is just the same. Mm-hmm. So if you didn't establish yourself enough when you were in the limelight, when you get out, people forget real quick. Yeah. But he got out, and he hasn't fought for a while, but you know what? He fought enough and left enough of a mark. It was loud enough that, out of sight, still in mind. Yeah. And, he's coming back. I think he's going to fight Dustin again, and it's been a time off. I'm not one that thinks that time off hurts a fighter. If he's committed to his craft, and if he's committed to training, and he stays in the gym, and he doesn't waste that time not doing anything. Mm-hmm. I think if a fighter takes two years off, you know, the only thing he misses is somebody in front of him that really is coming at him to beat him up. And I was nice in saying that. I could have said something else, okay? But somebody that's really not, because when they train, you know what? You kind of set your training up as to how hard the other person goes at you. You know, closer you get to the fight, the more they ease off, or vice versa. But you know, if a guy conditions himself and his mind is right, his mental is good, 2 years off, you know, don't sleep on that guy. Don't sleep on it.
And like you're a very motivational guy and very positive guy, Burt. Like, where did that come from? Is it like a family thing, or is it throughout life? What kept spur you on?
My mom, plain and simple. My mom was a motivated, high. If you can imagine, my mom's energy was 3 times mine. And she was like that. She was like that till the day she died. My mom instilled that energy level in all of us, the motivation to work and get things done. With her, there was never ever I can't or the word no. She didn't hear those things. You could never ever say to her, well, no. Or no, didn't hear. But her energy level was 3 times mine. I said it before, but it also very infectious. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't hard for me to pick that up. And for me, it was normal or the right thing to do. And then when I got into boxing and sports, you know, the energy, I saw that the energy level had to be high. And I got to understand what fighters go through in training and what they went through I'll tell you a quick story. Early on in my career, I think it was the 3rd fight that I did in California, and it was a 4-round fight. And back then, guys were getting, believe it or not, $35 to $50 a round. Okay, which guys don't. That's not even their per diem money today. Yep. Today they get $50 or $60 a day for eating money, and that might be a little too. That might not be enough. But this guy was fighting, and he had a fight, 4-round fight, which at the time he was on the high end because it was a big card. So he got $100 a round, and this guy, because it was such a big card, and I won't name the promoter, I don't want to call him out, but the guy fought his ass off. And at the end of the 4-round fight, he went to get his check. Well, fighters also do medicals. Yeah. And this guy did his medicals in California. And I think at the time, all of his medicals, the eye, the EKG, the blood, the scan, all of those things cost him, I think it was $250. And they took that money out of his $400. Whoa. That poor kid came up to me and damn near in tears, and he said, you know what, Mr. Watson, this is all the money I got. And he was broken down, man. And he had to go home. He had to feed his family. So I had back then was good money. I had $110 in my pocket. I gave him $100.
Brilliant.
And he was happy. But I said at that point, I said, you know what? I will never, ever again let somebody mistreat another fighter like that ever again.
Fair play, yeah.
Not that I can control what they accepted to take a fight or pay for, but I could control that they didn't feel like they were not appreciated. Mm-hmm. I could control that they were put above. So at that point, my mission was to treat the fighters and make them feel like it was all about them, to make them feel special, that when they walked into a dressing room, their name was on the door. When they got into the dressing room, their name was on a chair, baby. Yep. Okay. Sure. When I got close to them, I got close to them, and I made sure they felt it, and that they knew that it was all about them, and I made it a point. But in the meantime, I amped myself up. Yeah. I didn't expect that, but I did. I amped myself up, and you know what? I've been amped since, and I'm still there now. You know, it's still the same, and it became, my body still kept going. You know, luckily for me, I wasn't a smoker. I wasn't a heavy drinker. I was a drinker, but I still drink Grand Marnier, and I chase it with a Heineken, baby. You know, but I didn't wear myself down. You know, I was able to sustain and stay around. But I made a concerted effort that I was going to make the fighters feel that they were there for more than just to get their ass whooped. That they were there because somebody cared. So I gave it to them, baby.
Awesome.
Hard.
I won't leave you too much longer, Burt. I know you're a busy man, but because the podcast is called the One Hit Podcast, what is the best one hit you've ever seen? It doesn't have to be boxing or MMA. It could be even baseball, right? But the best one hit that comes to your head and go, wow.
March 8th, 1971, Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali.
My birthday. I'm March 8th.
I think I knew that. Yeah, right. When Joe Frazier jumped off that ground with that one, and Muhammad went down, you know, and you remember Muhammad going down and his legs up in the tassels. I remember that. I remember that, you know, and that was my very first boxing experience on that level, to see it, and it stays in my head, and I will always, and I've seen a lot since then. I've done Mike Tyson, and I've done Roy Jones, and I've done fights with Brock Lesnar and Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell, who probably in MMA, I mean, he went to knock people out. That was what this was all about.
Yeah.
You know,
the Iceman.
That one, yeah, the Iceman. So I've seen a few punchers and knockouts, but that one sticks out in my head and will probably till I shut these eyes.
Brilliant. And our listeners, to get a hold of you sometime on Instagram and all, it's at Burt Watson for real. And yeah, I was looking
Burt Watson for real, baby. You know, and if I'm now doing my own little, maybe not as good as the one hit
Legend podcast,
but I got my Legends to Legends podcast, baby, which is on MMA Junkie, and just kind of you click in and on, and they'll let you know when the show's coming up. But follow your boy, baby, Burt Watson for real.
And I'll share your podcast. Media. I'll get a sharing. And before we go, Burt, can we get a wee rolling?
Oh, baby, you only get that when it's time to work. And when it's time to work, you know what that means, baby. We rolling! Yeah! All night long. Ooh.
Love it, Burt. Thanks very much for coming on.
My pleasure, man. Good luck to you, baby. Peace.
It's been very fun. Good luck.
Legends to legends.
You know what? See ya.
I am the greatest.
Be water, my friend.